lot of people that have talked to us, they love the idea of being in maybe a slower growth, sort of safer investment like gold and silver. So there's a lot of new buyers out on the market, which I think will just only increase the value and make it more rare.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Silver Bullion Television, SBTV. I'm your host, Patrick Vieira. Collin Plume joins us today. Collin is the president and CEO of Noble Gold, with 20 years of experience in property insurance, commercial real estate, and precious metals investments. Collin is well versed in finance and economics while realizing the value of monetary protection for his clients. And as such, Collin is here today to talk to us about precious metals, IRAs. It's time to saddle up and silver up for Collin Plume. Collin, welcome to SBTV. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you on. It's the first time to get to talk to you. And since it is that, can you tell us a little about yourself and about Noble Gold?
Yeah. I have been I've been in asset preservation for a long time. I sort of started my career in the insurance business and transitioned into commercial real estate, which I sold shopping centers, apartment buildings, and got to be around some of the wealthiest, sort of smartest people in the world and learn about how they sort of protect their assets and decided to transition into the precious metal space sort of on a fluke. Met someone and they started talking to me about it. My father had collected silver coins, so I had some experience. He had given me some of his collection, and I was interested by it. Didn't know too much about it, but was interested to learn more and sort of fell in love with the physical metal, the process, and just sort of everything about it. I love that there were so many people that didn't know about it. It was a niche market, and I felt there was a good opportunity to educate people more because I think there's a lot of bad information in the precious metal space, and um, lots of different types of coins and products. So I wanted to simplify that and create a company that gives great education and also a lot of great service. So we started Noble Gold, and over the last 3 or 4 years, we've been in business longer than that. The last 3 or 4 years, we've actually been the number one gold IRA provider in the country. We've done more IRAs than anybody, and so it's been a very interesting ride, and a lot of people have learned a lot about precious metals from us and how the IRAs work, and we have a full team that does a lot of the paperwork and a lot of the hard work there. But so yeah, so it's been interesting ride from insurance to properties, and now dealing with really the only true currency out there, which is gold and silver, and it's been great.
Collin, regarding gold and silver, of course, what are some things you see happening today that would cause you to say this is a time to be looking at a precious metals and perhaps a precious metals IRA?
Well, I think really it's always been in high demand, but I think during COVID in 2020 is when we saw a really dramatic shift in the markets on both metals. I think the demand became really unbelievable, partly because a lot of the mining stopped all over the world, and so there was this sort of fervor for metals. And if you were lucky to have any, frankly, at that point, it was hard to get inventory from April from 2020 all the way to probably the end of that year. Even into 2021, it was pretty difficult to get inventory. We were pretty lucky to buy a lot of the inventory sort of early on, so we never actually ran out of inventory. But I think that really set the precedent for the world in a lot of ways because it did a number of things. One, it changed the working landscape forever, right? Most people were going into an office, and now most people are not. A lot of people are not going back to the office, and sort of it really shifted that whole real estate world and how we live in 6 months, a year. Everyone's world sort of shifted, and it's very rare to see these type of events that change the world so quickly into what we know today. And even today, if you talk to people, they don't even remember a lot of times how it was only a few years before that. So I think we've had one of the biggest cultural shifts in life during COVID, just overall. And then I also think it put precious metals in the forefront because we had such unbelievable log jams in so many industries. And then at the end of it was obviously this unbelievable inflation. And so I think people started to look at fiat money differently than before. I think that they you know, inflation they always say is like kind of like a sneaky hidden secret, and it wasn't sneaky or hidden anymore. It was right, right in people's face. And so I think that's something that's really changed people's mindset about investing in general, precious metals, and then obviously all the scandals happening in crypto and a number of things happening out there. I think people are sort of clamoring for something sort of tangible and real, and that's I think that's helped expose precious metals to the public.
Yeah, completely agree. Because here, over in Asia, in Singapore, where I'm at, we also saw demand during that time. The demand is still there. It may have tapered off a little bit, but it's still there. But Colin, during that time when we saw the demand, were you also seeing demand with, let's say, precious metals IRAs?
Absolutely, yeah. We saw a tremendous demand for the IRA business. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people first of all got laid off, so an old 401k can turn into a self-directed IRA or any kind of IRA, or you have the ability to move it to the next employer. But I always tell people that, if you leave a job and you have the ability to move that 401k, you should always move it into a self-directed IRA, whether you buy precious metals or whatever asset you want. But it's really, I think it is a nice advantage to have control of what you can invest into, and the IRA gives you that ability. Whereas if when you work for an employer, that employer decides which custodian you're going to go with, and they also decide which assets are going in there. It's typically going to be mutual funds. Some of them will have some exposure to precious metals or mining, but you're never going to be able to buy the actual real metal. You're only going to buy paper investments. So you don't have a lot of flexibility. And I think when you have changes in the economy, having that ability as a person to decide what you're going to do is really powerful. And so I think a lot of people saw the ability and the chance to move their 401ks into precious metals or just move their IRAs. So yeah, so our demand really sort of skyrocketed. It also, I think it gave people a lot of time to think about investments for the first time. I think, we saw a boom in trading in general in a lot of industries like day trading and, all these trading people started doing things and they never probably even looked at the retirement account before, and they had a little bit more time. So I think it's in a number of ways, all of the, horrible things that unfortunately happened to people during COVID, there was positives. And I think giving people time to really focus on themselves and also look at their investments and look at their trajectory, I think it was a huge advantage for people that actually did that.
If you're enjoying this interview with Collin Plume from Noble Golden Eye, please consider subscribing to our YouTube channel. Let the algos know you'd like to see more content like this. And if you would like to learn more about systemic wealth protection, please do visit us at www.silverbullion.com.sg. Right. Agree with that part about people taking investments more into their hands, because also at that time we saw the whole GameStop thing really taking off.
Yeah, that was quite interesting, and I as much as the way that story ended, and the shift with Robinhood, and it was just a classic example of people trying to take some power back into their hands, right? And sort of like send it to these hedge funds and all these corporations that there's a lot of corporations out, these hedge funds that just they're preying on businesses to close, right? They're trying to push them out of business for a profit, and to see just a bunch of regular people come and push this stock up and put some of these hedge funds out of business. I think people really enjoyed that. I know I did, And but it is interesting how that social dynamic of people, coming together and pushing a stock up, and the ability to do that is the same ability that a lot of corporations have had, even in the precious metal space. I mean, we've seen, I remember in 2011 when literally overnight they increased the margin calls when silver broke 40 and basically crushed that whole market. And a number of large organizations like Fidelity and a lot of them got sued, but the damage had already been done, right? They increased the margin calls. They wanted the price to come down, and sure enough, they did. They were able to push the price of silver down, and everyday Americans and regular people that bought silver then got taken advantage of. So the GameStop story is something that I sort of smile at, and it's nice to see that it's nice to see the little guy win sometimes in those stories.
Yeah, absolutely. Always for that guy. He's got to get some wins under his belt too. But with
Yeah.
the precious metals IRA, let me go back a bit. You mentioned the word self-directed IRA, and we're talking about precious metals IRA. So I'm assuming a precious metals IRA is sort of like a subset of a self-directed IRA.
Yeah, yeah. In essence, it's one of the allowed assets, alternative assets in precious metals, being precious metals. So, but it has to be a self-directed IRA for you to be able to put the actual metal in it. So, but there's a lot of options. You can buy real estate in a self-directed IRA. This one guy I knew, he bought a winery, which I don't know, that probably can end badly, I think. But there's a lot of alternative investments that people aren't aware of that you can put into IRA as long as you have it in a self-directed custodian. So in essence, we Noble Gold, we help get them over to the new custodian. We help them with their custodian. One of the things that did happen now that you're mentioning during COVID was a lot of custodians were struggling. And one of the things that happens a lot of times, and that's why we have a full team, is that they make it difficult to move funds, basically. In the last 3 years, it's very interesting because I've been in that space and I've looked at, probably thousands of 401k statements. They've even done this new thing where they actually have taken people's account numbers off their statement because they want to make it more difficult for someone to move the account. They've done a lot of very interesting, sort of tricky big business type of maneuvers. Because obviously it creates another step. If you want to move the account, then you got to figure out how to go online or you got to call them. They're always trying to add another step to make it difficult for you to move your money. But obviously our team is aware of that. And we know how to do it. But yeah, so that was one of the things that started to happen, is that a lot of these big companies, these big custodians, were trying to make it more difficult for us to move funds. But we have a team. Our IRA team actually works 7 days a week because of the amount of paperwork. And some people are free on Saturday and Sunday, so we want to have staff available. But yeah, in essence, you can move an old 401k, traditional IRA, self-directed IRA, SEP IRA, Roth IRA. There's others like 403bs. There's a bunch of other plans, but pretty much most of them you can move as long as it's not attached with a current employer, or if you are still working there, you have a 401k. If you're above the age of 59 and a half, then you can move some of the funds. They allow you to move some of the funds to a self-directed.
Okay, yeah, that's good because I was going to ask you what are some of the hoops that a person may have to jump through in trying to open up a self-directed then precious metals 401k.
Yeah, I mean the hardest part probably is just getting the information on your current custodian if you don't have it available. Now, if you have an online account, people will just take a picture and they'll send it to us, and we can kind of help them. I mean, we have like people over the phone you can call, and I'm sort of making it. In some ways, it's harder than it needs to be, but we have been able to do it. I mean, we do thousands and thousands and thousands of these every year, so we are very familiar how it works. But yeah, basically we move it from one qualified account to another, and then once the funds are live, then you can buy gold, silver, platinum, or palladium, or the four eligible. You can do one or all of the metals, and then basically when it comes to us, once the funds come live, we call you and we go through the different IRA eligible products, and the pricing and everything, so you know what you're dealing with. And then from there, we confirm the price, and then we ship the metal to a third party depository. And there's depositories all over the country. We typically use, there's one in Texas called IDS Texas. It's typically what we use. And the reason we use that depository is because not all the depositories segregate the gold and the silver, but they do segregate the gold and the silver. Some of the biggest ones you know of actually commingle the metals, which is quite scary. There's actually a big depository that I don't know if you're aware. I think it's, I don't want to misquote it, but it's in Delaware. I can't remember the name of it, but they actually filed for Chapter 11 or 13 recently, and they've offered me to have storage there. But I'd never been there. A, but B, they don't offer segregated storage, and I don't do any storage of metals unless it's segregated for the exact reason, because now it's a big mess, right? Nobody knows. It's all commingled, so nobody knows whose is who, and those people are probably going to run into some situations. Also, that depository, from what I've been told, they sold metals too. That's always a red flag. I think I don't think you want your depository selling metals, which is why I don't own the depository. It's owned by a third party, because I have an obligation to my client, and if I go there when I do my audits, and I do, and they don't have metals, it's not I'm going to make sure that it's there. So I don't think you ever want to go with a company that stores their own metals, because there's no way to have any checks and balances in that situation, and that's why I've never stored my own metals. We always store a third party.
Right. Yeah, I think that Delaware depository made some news about 4 or 5 months ago or so. So
Yeah,
I do recall that. But Colin, when it comes to precious metals, what are the ways you can have a precious metals IRA? Meaning, can you do ETFs? Can you do maybe gold backed tokens or things like that?
you can do ETFs. Yeah, you can absolutely buy it. We don't do that, but you can do that. Gold back tokens. I'm not sure. What do you mean by that exactly?
Like let's say there's actual physical gold behind, or let's just say digital gold.
Yeah, digital gold's an option. Yeah, I mean, same concern is that you need to make sure you're dealing with a company that actually is, storing it and doing an audit. And there are companies that do that. In that situation, and it's not, maybe it's for somebody, but when you do like a fractional gold or fractional silver, you're just getting a piece of a big bar, right? So as long as they do, good reporting, and you can trust it, and someone audits it, that's another way to buy it. But you don't get the same satisfaction, I think, as owning the gold and silver sort of by yourself, right?
So let's say for those that do hold, let's just say a 401k, and of course they are hearing the words like inflation, maybe currency crisis, things like that, and they're hearing gold as being a store of value, a store of wealth. What would be the process of moving that 401k or rolling over that 401k into a precious metals IRA? Would they contact you first, or do they talk to their employer, or how would they go about making that initial move?
Yeah. So as long as they're not employed there, they would be eligible on the 401k side, or if they're above the age of 59 and a half. Those are the two ways you could move a 401k, and that's into any asset. It's the same rules. Um, Basically, what you would do is you'd set an account up with us first, so you get an account number, because what you're going to need on a 401k, it's unique in that actually do need to call that custodian, and they're actually going to send the funds over. On an IRA, we can actually do the paperwork for you, and we can just send them on a form. But on an old 401k, they don't allow this. So we can go and do a conference call with you and the client. That's what we typically do. We'll call the custodian. We'll tell them how to make the check out, and then basically they can send the check directly to the custodian, or they can send it to the client. We can forward it however they want to do it. And then basically the new custodian puts it in the account under an IRA, and then they notify the IRS that the funds were sent there, so there's no tax obligations because it's a tax-free rollover. And then once the funds get there, then you'd have the ability to put it into gold and silver, platinum, and palladium, and then you get online access. You can see your account, so it's like any other asset. The one difference is at distribution time. when you're taking your distributions. Gold and silver are the only asset that you can actually take the actual metal in kind. So you can do an in kind distribution when you want down the road when you retire. You can liquidate back into cash too, but it's the only asset that, let's say you're going to take a $5,000 distribution, you could take it out in the gold and silver that you own.
Is there a percentage, let's say a minimum or maximum limit of how much of that 401k that can be used for this precious metals IRA?
No, I mean, I think that there's just you want to have. I think there's just common sense percentages where you want to be diversified. The thing about me, and I've always said in every interview, is that it's good to be diversified in different assets. So I think whatever percentage you decide, know that there's risk involved in gold and silver, and that it's important to know that you need to have different assets out there to make sure that because you never know where the market's going to be when you need money. But there's no percentage requirements, or there's no minimums that are required to do that.
So if someone is thinking about doing this, they would contact you first, and then I guess you would go back around and contact their employer or whoever is managing that 401k.
Yeah, in essence, all we really need is a statement so we can get that account number so we know who the custodian is. That's really all. Everything else is pretty simple. We do everything through DocuSign. So all that stuff, the paperwork's really easy. I mean, you can have an IRA, all the paperwork signed in 5 minutes, and then it's just us helping you move the funds over. You can also start a new account if you don't have an IRA. You can start a new account. It depends what the limits are. Every age bracket and state, there's income requirements. And then if you're self-employed, you can go a little bit higher than just person that's employed at a company. You can go, depending on your income, you can go all the way up to like 55 or 56,000 a year that you can contribute to a SEP IRA. So we've done that for people that are like have a business and they want the tax write-off. So we've been able to assist them setting up the SEP IRA. That's really easy because there's no money movement. You just sign up, you send the check or the wire, and then you can buy the metals, the next day. So.
Okay, yeah, that's good to know again because this isn't entirely all about rolling over 401k. You can not have a 401k and still get into a self-directed IRA program with you.
Correct, absolutely.
One question we have all the time, guys will ask us, can I keep my gold and silver at home? The gold and silver in that precious metals IRA.
The IRS is very clear on this. They actually have it on their website. They are not okay with having anyone, none of the assets you have in an IRA are held in your custodianship, right? I mean, whether it's stocks or anything in there, everything's stored at a third party because they want to tax you. So, and they want to have the ability to control it. So, nothing in the IRA can be held at home. There were companies that did it for many years. Almost all of them have stopped doing it, and I think it's because they've ran into problems because early on it was kind of a big push. People thought that they could do it. Also, there's a lot of reporting, tax reporting you have to do. You would take all that on onto yourself if you try to do it. The companies that I saw do it, they would have you create an LLC, which it doesn't really make sense to create a business to store metals at your house. It's not a business, so I never understood how they were able to do it for those years. But I think the IRS was just busy and they couldn't really harp on it too much. But I don't think there's any way that you're going to do that and not run into an issue with the IRS. And you really want to be careful. Those fines are really high if you don't do things right in that retirement space. Things like RMDs and things, you have to do them. So you want a third party custodian to take some responsibility. And I've seen people, they didn't take their distributions because once you turn 70 and a half, you have to take distributions. And I've seen people not do it and delay. And then the IRS has come back and taxed them almost at 50%. So you want to make sure that you have a custodian that is sophisticated and does this, because the last thing you want to do is have all this great money saved for your retirement, and then the IRS comes in and takes a big chunk of it because you made a clerical error, right? So that's why we a large custodian that's been in business since 1977, and they have $45 billion under management, and they're big. They've been doing it for a long time to make sure that nobody's got a problem.
So I guess as they say, don't attempt to try this at home. It's not going to work out well for you.
So yeah, if you want, I mean, a lot of our clients do IRAs. They buy metals from us directly, and they get it shipped to your doorstep. Or, I have people call me that I don't want to do it, and this and they tell me they're 57, and I say, well, if you do it now at 59 and a half, you can take it. You can take a distribution, right? So you'd only have to wait 2.5 years to do it. So I mean, you're going to get the metal if you want it. I just want to make it a situation with people that buy from us that they avoid those taxes, they avoid those penalties, and so that's why we've always done it this way, and we've never had an issue with anyone with the IRS.
Okay, so that's great because there are a lot of people who feel that if you don't hold it, you don't own it. So in this case, once they actually hit a certain age, they can actually take it back home and have it with them.
Correct, and a lot of people do it. Especially last year, I think was the highest number of in-kind distributions. We buy it back from the metal too. So if someone needs cash, we would do that, of course. But last year, I can't remember what the number was, but I think it was like almost 15 or 20%, something like that. Actually took the distributions, which was much higher than before. So I think it was an interesting year for people where they just felt like they didn't want to put it in cash and they'd rather have the metal. So we had a lot of in-kind distributions last year, which is great. Because then, later on, if wherever they want to sell it, wherever they want to do with it, they have it in their hands and they can liquidate it at any time.
Well, one thing we often get asked, people will say, "Hey, can we have our precious metals IRA vaulted overseas outside of the U.S.?" And I'm asking this because I have heard yes, you can, and I have also heard no, you cannot. But people actually do this.
Yeah, I don't think there's any problem with storing it overseas. We have a depository in Canada, so you can store it there in your IRA. I think, yeah, you can absolutely do it. I don't think there's any issue. There's some places that I've heard you could store that I would be concerned because, you want to make sure you're in a place where the government is, going to handle it the right way, depending on how things go. And obviously, there could be a lot of value there. So I don't know if I would feel great about having it that far. I mean, that's part of the reason you like precious metals is you want more access and more control. So I don't think having it in the Cayman Islands would be, which is I think one of the places people do it. I don't think that's as desired for a lot of our clients, but we've had some clients store in Canada, and that's not that far, and that is an option, and it is IRA eligible for them.
With these self-directed IRAs, year over year, are you seeing these really starting to get more and more attention?
I think it has gotten more attention, especially with what's happened over the last, probably 2 years with crypto, where you had these exchanges that were supposed to be sort of places that were safe, and they were commingling funds and stealing, and so I think a lot of people are kind of in a way going old school and liking the idea of having the actual metal in their retirement account. Coupled with the fact that now that people are aware that it's an option, it could be really good because people like all these people that got laid off in Google and all this, they have these big 401ks. If they moved it into precious metals, let's say right now, when they get their next job, that next job they're going to have a 401k. They're going to be back in the stock market as soon as they start that next job. So now they could have this. They could have this precious metals IRA, and then they could have this 401k. So they got these two investment vehicles. So it does. I think that does really is. I think it's a really smart investment to have different assets and different ways to do it. And obviously, you go to a lot of these big employers; they contribute for you. It's almost free money in a lot of ways, right? But being stuck in one investment sort of makes it difficult. So I think having the flexibility to put precious metals in maybe an old 401k, I think is really advantageous. And yeah, we've seen the demand really grow. Our depository in Texas has tripled over the last 2 or 3 years in size. So it's definitely a growing part of the investment landscape.
Would you let's say with all that's going on, of course we're seeing de-dollarization going on throughout the world. We're seeing interest rates still pretty high and look to move up a bit, which is going to make your mortgages more expensive. Jobs are getting kind of sketchy right now, job situations. Would this be a reasons why you may want to move out of that 401k, which may be attached to treasuries, which may be attached to stock markets, things like that? If that's the only thing you have it in right now, would this be a wise decision to start to diversify it a bit?
Well, it's like I think what it comes down to with it when you have inflation at reported, let's say 6 to 8%, it really forces an investor to move away from having any cash. Unfortunately, it really discourages a saver. This kind of environment, this kind of debt environment. And there's always a 2 or 3% gap between what a savings account and what inflation is. I mean, it seems like that's pretty consistent. Um, and the banks now in the U.S., a lot of them are offering 3 and 4% savings account returns, but obviously inflation's above 6, so there's still that 2% gap. So I think that you're sort of forced to look at what your different options are, and I think that a lot of people that have talked to us, they love the idea of being maybe in a slower growth, sort of safer investment. I think that a lot of these quicker investments got a lot of excitement over the last 3 or 4 years with people day trading and with crypto, and so there was this kind of fervor for that. But I think a lot of people are starting to realize that having an investment that can drop 40, 50, 60, 70%, it really can destroy your potential, growth story. And so moving into something that maybe is a little slower moving, like gold, and silver's moves up and down a little much faster, I would say. But I think people are sort of getting attracted to that sort of dynamic of that slower growth, because it makes they feel safer, and being, I always say, if you want to be risky in an investment, start a business, because at least if you start a business, you're invest that money, whatever you're putting in it is you're investing it in yourself, right? It's hard to invest in things that are risky if you're a normal person who makes a normal wage, because those big losses can really sort of set you back, and it's better to target 6 to 10 or 12% returns, consistent returns, and then put yourself in a position where you have a 30 or 40 or 50% loss. Even investing in a business, even if it doesn't work out initially, you do get the experience, A, but B, there's a tax write-off when you invest in a business for yourself. So there's other reasons why I think investing in, if you're going to take a riskier bet, investing in yourself and some kind of entrepreneurship, like your channel and things that you're doing, those things tend to pay out more over the long term, and it just adds value, I think, to everybody, and also your life. It adds tremendous value. So I think silver's great right now. I think gold's great. I think people always talk about gold, but I really personally I'm big on silver. I own a lot of silver. I love it. And I think that there's a lot of interesting things happening. Obviously, India is jumping into the silver market with their ETFs, which I find very interesting, because obviously they've been fascinated with gold for thousands of years, and now they're coming into this situation where they have silver as an option, which they never really had. So there's a lot of new buyers out on the market, which I think will just only increase the value, and make it more rare over time.
One last question though. Let's say for people who belong to unions and they give monthly contributions that go to their annuities, let's say, is it possible to use that annuity into put it into a precious metals or self-directed IRA?
Pensions and annuities are tricky. They usually have a date that they will let you escape, so to speak, which is what my IRA manager always says. There's it's like once a year, or it takes a few years, because the idea with annuities is they typically lock you up for a while and they guarantee a return, but you're locked in there. And then there's a date where I can't think of the term, where they sort of open up, and so we've done pensions, we've done annuities. Once they sort of hit that window, they do make it difficult too. But yeah, there are possibilities there, because I know people are concerned about how long they'll pay out for. the viability of those products. So we've definitely moved those accounts over, and moved them into precious metals, and done it in the IRA vehicle.
Okay, it's good to know. I know a lot of people out there, firefighters, unions, and things like that. They understand what's going on in the world with inflation, de-dollarization, loss of purchasing power. They get it. They understand it, and they have questions if they can move their annuities into a
Yeah,
self-directed IRA. So that is your realm. You would have to answer those types of questions. That's above my pay grade and knowledge here. But Colin, before we wrap up, can you let us know how we can contact you, or we can follow you maybe on social media to get more of your views and insights?
yeah. So you can call us at 877-646-5347. We're open all business hours and Saturday for 5 hours. Or you can go to our website at noblegoldinvestments.com. Either one of those places, if you call in during any business hour, you're going to talk to a live person, and they can answer a lot of questions. That's typically what I tell people: is call first, and then we'll send you out. We have a silver guide, we have a gold guide, we have an IRA, we have a lot of guides. So get that free information, ask questions, because I do think there's a lot of information there to sort of digest, and maybe there's just two questions on the top of your head that you could get answered. So I say for people to do that. We also have a YouTube channel at Noble Gold Investments. It's our YouTube channel, and we post videos 2 or 3 times a week, and we give little snippets of what's happening in the metals market, what's happening in banks, the economy. But they're short and digestible, and we try to give people a lot of good information there. So those two places where, any of those places you'll find us, and I appreciate you having me on. I obviously love talking about gold and silver. It's one of my favorite topics, and it's just great to be here and talk about. I know a lot of people ask questions about IRAs, and it can be confusing, and the big custodians in a way try to make it confusing, but we can simplify it for you, and if it's an option and you're interested, we can help you get it into precious metals.
All right. Well, I'm glad you have a lot of guys because the IRS is getting a lot of guys, 87,000 more, I believe. So Colin might be hiring soon to combat that.
Yeah.
Just kidding there, just kidding. But Colin Plume, we appreciate the time you've given. I definitely would like to get you back on, and we can talk more about things like gold, silver, the economy, things like that. So I do appreciate your time,
Absolutely.
and look forward to doing this again.
Thanks so much, Patrick. Have a good day.
That was Collin Plume, President and CEO of Noble Gold, sharing with us the ins and outs of self-directed precious metals IRA. If you would like more info on precious metals IRAs, please visit Collin's website, www.noblegoldinvestments.com. And if you're considering storing your metals overseas, including for precious metals IRAs, please contact us here at SBTV at silverbullion.com.sg. Audio-only versions of this interview can be found on iTunes and Spotify.